play will go under review.
Good people who watch this program, listen to this program, thank you all so much for being here on a Tuesday evening for this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa, and you can find me on Twitter /X at show_DeRosa, and now recently on Blue Sky at joederosa.bksy.social. I think I got that right. That's a new one that I'm going to get used to reading when the show starts. But again, thank you all for being here. It's Chiefs week, everybody. The week that you all have circled on your calendars, the week that we all pay extra attention to when it comes up, and the one that's always in the back of our minds when the season begins. And speaking of seasons, tonight's tagline is Jonami Code, because listen, every NFL season for your team will sometimes have its ups. It'll sometimes have its downs. Every now and then, things just go sideways, left to right. You know, sometimes it can be bad, but sometimes it could be awesome. And I just feel like when it comes to Bills versus Chiefs, those games are always just an amalgamation of all those emotions. So we are going to go over this matchup in detail tonight. And when I say we, obviously I don't just mean me. I mean me and my esteemed guest, Mr. Adam Pencil, who has been on the show before, film coordinator at Cover One. Adam, you have been posting very insightful analytics on Twitter for a long time, and I always appreciate your insight, and it's always why I want to get you on the program. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm good, Joe. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited. These are the weeks that we were always waiting for, right?
Indeed, man. This matchup to me is one that every season, like I said, you think about it all the time. No matter where you are in, your record, no matter where the Bills are playing, that shadow of the Kansas City Chiefs is always following you until that matchup happens. And it's so exciting to finally be here. And I'm really pumped to just see what this looks like this season of all seasons, given the retooling year for the Bills, conversation that I've had and plenty of people had, as well as just Kansas City being undefeated and some of the ways they've been able to just pull wins together and how that team looks. This is just a very exciting clash of the Titans that I think we've been looking forward to for a long time. And Adam, I'm just going to turn it back to you and ask your general thoughts before we get into a deeper dive of this matchup.
Yeah, well, you're right there. I think, if you want to start from just surface level stuff, I would say the interesting thing about this matchup is kind of how low pressure it feels. And I say that because it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot for them to lose right now. The division is all but wrapped up. They're going to have at least one home playoff game. The thing that makes this game exciting, of course, is the possibility of maybe being able to be the 1 seed overall in the AFC and ensure that you have home field advantage all the way throughout the playoffs. But there's also some tough games remaining on the schedule after this one that, is going to make it very difficult for them to catch Kansas City in the first place. So, to me, this feels like a little bit like we're playing with house money, and also kind of looks or feels like obviously like a yardstick game to see how you measure up to, one of the best teams in the NFL before you get into, the real true test in the playoffs. And, but at the end of the day, it's a regular season matchup, and what happens now, as we've learned in the past, is not necessarily what happens in January and February. So that's how I've been looking at it.
Yeah, and I totally agree and love the house money topic, or the bringing up the fact that it almost feels like you're playing ahead, because so many narratives around the Bills and so many conversations that our group has had and people have had, that I've had on the show, other shows have had been that this is a retooling year. You don't really expect the Bills to, be flat out bad, but you're also wondering, like, what's their ceiling look like? How good can they really be? And now entering Chiefs week, very much the polar opposite vibe of last year, where you were 5-5 with a team that you really thought was shaped up to contend again. This time you go into it 8-2, and you're feeling pretty good about the season. and you're feeling pretty good about the matchup, even though it's one that, again, the team is undefeated. You know what the Chiefs are, and they're one that seems to find a way to win in the most infuriating of ways, and also just from being, a very consistent, very experienced group of vets that are able to lead this team to really solid wins and core fundamental wins. And, it's not that I expect the team to lose, and it's not that I want the Bills to lose this game because, you say it, it's a measuring stick. And so far, their 2 measuring stick games this season have been disappointments in Baltimore game and Houston game. But it's also an opportunity for you to see what you got and see what you need to course correct. Because if you do believe that this team is a playoff team, and by all advanced metrics and all odds right now they are, then this is a great chance for you to just, test the waters, see how you fare against Kansas City, and kind of hopefully pull a reverse Uno if you get to the playoffs and face them again like they've done to you, where now you've gotten a feel for what they're trying to run in the regular season, and hopefully there's more of a blueprint for fighting against them in the playoffs, ideally being healthy as well. But I do think that it's a matchup right now where it feels comfortable either way. I don't have high expectations. I don't think they're going to go in there and get blown out either. So it's really one that when we get deeper into this dive and we could start that conversation, Adam, I think there are some very key matchups, both for the Bills, for the Chiefs, that just make you kind of wonder even more like who the hell is going to win this game, because it seems very even as far as just how these teams stack up with each other, whether it's just the metrics or some of the personnel they have, as well as just like, again, experience and how they've played each other and how neutral those games tend to go, at least in the regular season. So let's just begin this by going over just any key relevant metrics you wanted to point out, any topics that you felt like you really wanted to hammer down that you think are going to be huge proponents of what happens in this game.
Yeah, well, I think just kind of starting, top down, if you look at just some of the basics, if you follow me on Twitter, you've seen that I've been sharing Menace and Havoc ratings all season. Menace was my way of kind of looking at some of the most popular offensive metrics that a lot of people in the analytics community used as a measuring stick to figure out which offenses and which defenses are among the best in the NFL, and combining them all into one stat while also looking at the dry finish percentage, which is kind of AKA how often a team's drives end in points, actual points on the scoreboard, whether that's, a field goal or a touchdown. The Bills have been a top 3 team in that metric all season long. So the offense has really been impressive. Havoc, on the other hand, is a look at how often the defense generates explosive plays. So we're talking about things like forced fumbles, not just standard fumbles, because you want to measure, plays that the defense is actually creating rather than just kind of lucking themselves into, right? So you're looking at things like forced fumbles, you're looking at interceptions, you're looking at pass breakups, sacks, of course, tackles for loss, things like that. The Bills have been very solid in that department all season long as well. Interestingly enough, this is the first season in a while that the Chiefs defense has actually kind of been, on the other side of that graph as far as Havoc's concerned. The offense is better than last year's version of the Chiefs offense, but the defense has actually fallen off a little bit. Either way, interestingly enough, these teams do have very similar numbers, on the whole. And if you look at their play styles, they're also very similar. Both teams have shifted more to heavier kind of run percentages on the earlier downs to get themselves into more manageable thirds. And they're running these long, methodical drives, burning clock, and basically controlling the ball to ensure that, they're keeping their offense on the field, letting the defense rest, and putting as many points on the board as possible.
Yeah, you brought that up, and that's what I wanted to kind of pivot to when we talked about specific, I guess, not individual matchups, but really what these teams are going to try and pull on each other. And one thing that I said to Uber yesterday that I've said to everybody is the Chiefs' offense is infuriatingly unsexy in that they are not going to have, at least all the time, because Andy Reid and co like to bust out a trick play every now and then, but they're not going to consistently air it down the field, even though they have Xavier Worthy and DeAndre Hopkins now. They're not going to try and get too air yard heavy as much as they're very focused on, like you said, being a methodical unit. And where that really stems from is how consistent their rushing attack is. And again, infuriatingly consistent because they're one of the highest in EPA per rush. But one of the things that always strikes me as like hilarious with them is when it comes to their runs of 10 plus yards, they are 30th. And I know Uber had pointed this out yesterday. They have only had one run that is, or I'm sorry, their longest run of the season was 15 yards. But what they're so good at doing is just getting those early downs runs that go for about 4.5 yards, or maybe like, you know, a solid like high 3 or 5, because they have Kareem Hunt right now, who has, even though he's not the most explosive dynamic runner, he's just a bruiser. He's just someone who can get you an extra bit of yardage even after he gets wrapped up. And it's what makes them so, in my eyes, dangerous. It's because of how consistent they are in this regard, no matter who they play. And also what that allows them to do, because now when you're, again, and I go back to this kind of concept all the time when I talk about what I want for the Bills offense and what I wanted for Josh Allen. But when you allow Patrick Mahomes short downs and distances, that gives this offense a lot of life, a lot of creativity, and it leans in a lot to what they're good at, which are this kind of principle of like rhythmic West Coast style, where when he has the structure in place and he has good pass pro, he can just get the ball out quickly to one of his, you know, seemingly 2,000 slot receivers in that offense or tight ends, and it works. And then when you have to face the threat of Patrick Mahomes just dissecting the middle of the field, that's where the explosives can be generated from, with guys like Xavier Worthy and D-Hop. And, you know, Adam, watching that Denver game back that they just played, it wasn't the prettiest for them, and a lot of that could be attributed to Denver's front seven just wreaking havoc on them, which was so much fun to watch, and Denver deserves so much credit for that defensive line. It's amazing. But even then, that principle was still there. And towards the end of the game, when they started taking the lead and started getting their groove going, that's what it was predicated on, as well as just taking advantage of, you know, Denver's aggression and throwing some screens and just keeping everything where it was efficient, it was methodical, and we'll get our licks when we can get them. But right now, we just got to get those yards. And that's what makes them tough, is just how consistent they are in this regard. So, I mean, any more things you want to discuss about their offense, really, and like what you've seen just based on metrics or what you've watched?
Yeah. So I brought a couple numbers to the table tonight that kind of highlight some of those things that you just outlined, right? So the lack of an explosive run game, but the example of it being extremely consistent and able to get those 4 and 5 yard chunks. I think a lot of that is driven from the fact that teams don't really feel threatened by Kansas City's downfield passing game right now. So, you know, even though they're able to win at the middle line of scrimmage with this power running right through the center of the line and get their 4 or 5 yard chunks, it's a lot easier for the defenses to come downhill and stop that in its tracks, so that limits it to that 4 or 5 yard chunks, rather than breaking to the outside or becoming something more serious that can really hurt you in generating explosives. The flip side of that, of course, is that we've talked a lot, and you hear a lot in the media, in anybody who talks football, about how good Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs have been on third down this year. You even saw it in the numbers. If you look at their game against Denver, they were below average in their conversion rates and things like that on first and second down, but on third down, they were incredible. And the reason for that is, if you look at Kansas City's average yards to go on third down this season, they have the second lowest of anyone in the NFL at 6.3 yards, right? So it's been their ability to win on first and second down and get them into these thirds and kind of manageables and shorts that have allowed them to be so efficient on third down and convert, because they have a lot of different ways they can go on third down if they're, you know, working from 6 yards or less the vast majority of the time, especially if they're working on, you know, the offensive side of the football field, because that still opens up the door for you to even run on third down, knowing you're going to go for it on fourth if you only have 1 yard to go, or you know, something along those lines. So that's really the heart of what's made them a difficult team to play. They're not going to kill you with explosives over the top or explosive runs. They're going to work their way down the field slowly, methodically, and try to wear you down systemically. Now, on the flip side, this is where this type of a game can sometimes play into the Bills' favor a little bit, because they are such a scrappy team. This havoc rate that we've talked about, the rate at which the Bills generate explosives on defense, pass breakups, interceptions, you can see it when they're out there every week. They're practicing the peanut punch. They're hitting everything that they have a chance to hit. And, you know, the film study that guys like Teron Johnson and Christian Benford and the whole defense really has put into making sure they know the reads and they can adjust and grab these interceptions. That's the type of team that you want to play. You want to play a team that wants to run those long drives because you're going to have more opportunities to generate turnovers.
Absolutely. And another thing that the Bills defense has been good at, because there's been a lot of conversation about their running defense and the deficiencies in it. And I think I don't want to say it's overblown. I don't think it's a perfect run D unit. Also, when you talk about Sean McDermott's time in Buffalo, the seemingly constant thing about defenses that he employs is that the rushing defense usually doesn't get favored in most metrics. But this year it actually has been in a lot of different stats. But one thing I like to highlight is their stuff percentage, because for as many big yards as the Bills might give up to running backs, they're also really good at getting into the backfield and causing negative plays. And you look at this Colts game they just played, and you had that one Jonathan Taylor explosive run. But if you take that, and you can't forget about it, it was a bad play. It was a bad execution error from the defense. But when you talk about the rest of the game and the second half mainly, and what they were able to do to neutralize that rushing threat, this defense does have the ability to kind of counter what Kansas City might be able to throw at them, which is just, again, trying to wreak havoc on the early down, get to Kareem Hunt in the backfield, not take the bait if they go for a delayed handoff, and ultimately try to make it where the first down is taken away. And all of a sudden they're not playing on that 2nd and 6 or not trying to layer their drive, but rather having to press a little bit more. And I thought that, again, I'll just talking about their most recent matchup, I thought Denver did a great job of this. And I thought that Denver on all early downs, were really making it a point to try and bear down. And they didn't win every single time, but they had their moments where the Chiefs weren't getting those 4 yards. The Chiefs weren't getting that kindling that lights the fire. And also because of that, that's kind of where the pass rush threat came in, and it became a lot more formidable, and Mahomes was kind of getting the crap kicked out of him by that unit. So I love that you bring that up, because, the consistency in Kansas City's approach and the methodical nature of what they do is usually the remedy for a lot of good teams when they face the Bills to keep Josh Allen off the field, to try and prevent them from getting it. But, not enough is talked about that component that you bring up with the turnovers. And the Bills, I believe, are leading the NFL right now in turnover differential, and they're second in total takeaways. They invite you to have these long drives. They want you to keep moving because they want to get their opportunity. And to them, it's not about the yards. It's about, can you finish? And when you talk about Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes and the whole cast and what they can do to you offensively in so many matchups, you're totally fine with them not finishing drives, and you're totally fine with them just kind of settling for 3 if they have to, because ultimately, one, if your offense can't get anything going against them, you're not going to win the game no matter what Kansas City's doing. But 2, you play with the mindset that Josh Allen in past matchups has been able to go toe-to-toe with both Patrick Mahomes, the Kansas City offense, and Steve Spagnuolo, who we could transition this conversation to a little bit. But you go with the impression that your offense is going to generate explosives, is going to be able to continue to kind of install their identity onto that defense and be a consistent run threat, a physical team with the capability of expanding plays, because Josh Allen can do so same way that Chiefs can. And for that reason, I think it's going to be just such a fun matchup to see how the Bills attack the Chiefs on first down, and how the Chiefs try to take advantage of maybe some of the deficiencies on the Bills defense, really that interior defensive line right now. That seems to be the deficiency when you talk about what they're going to do on early downs in this game. So Adam, before we go full defense, is there anything else you wanted to bring up just for the Chiefs offense, since we're on that subject?
Well, this is teams always save their stuff for the big games, right? And, this is a day that we might end up seeing a little bit of the departure away from the Chiefs wanting to be so run heavy on the early downs. Yes, the Bills have struggled with some explosive runs in the first half, and I could see them, wanting to at least test that and, get a shot at exploiting some of that. But, we've seen what Andy Reid has done to sort of expose Bills backup linebackers when they've been in. And at times, Dorian Williams has been a little bit of a liability on the pass side of things. He has improved as the season's gone along, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them testing him, early on, maybe on first and second down, passing a little bit more frequently than they otherwise have been.
There's a great opportunity in a matchup like this to break your tendencies. It's something that I want the Bills to do really bad in certain defensive areas, but I could 100% see the Chiefs trying to do that as well. And you've seen it in past matchups, mainly the playoff game. And granted, that was a linebacker room that was entirely depleted. You didn't have Bernard. I don't believe you had Dotson. You were facing the Chiefs with your third, fourth string linebackers, and they knew. So what did? They attacked the middle of the field relentlessly. They used their tight ends. They used motion to draw these people off. They used different types of concepts to try and get linebackers out of position and just take advantage. Now, you've talked about Dorian Williams and coverage. That does seem to be the deficiency in his game. And as Uber mentioned when I was on his show last night, and something that I think we can all agree is Andy Reid is a savvy enough coach to take advantage of what you're weak at. And one of the things the Bills seem to be weak at is really one, again, I think right now in the interior defensive line. And one thing about the Chiefs too, on that note, because I had the stat pulled up, the Chiefs will attack between the tackles more than they'll bounce outside. Right now, they have the sixth highest percentage of runs between the tackles, 28th in runs outside of the tackle. So they're going to try and push this ball behind their guards, behind their center, trying to just take advantage and exploit anything that they can up the middle of the field. And when you look at what this defensive line has looked like, especially, on a play-per-play basis, it hasn't been the worst in the league, but it has been an issue where Ed and Daquan Jones just aren't living up to the potential that they have in weeks past. I still believe that can change. I still have hope for it changing. I watched every Ed rep today, and I saw some flashes as well as some things where either they got the ball out quick and he couldn't really do much on the pass rushing snap, or he got moved off in a double, which wasn't really fun to watch. So that's going to be something I think Andy Reid does. But like you just said, defending the middle of the field consistently, at least on Dorian Williams' side, maybe trying to pick on him, maybe trying to use misdirection to get him out of his spot and just get one of those quick timing passes where even if he's just a few feet away, it's just enough. And the Chiefs love doing this, and they did it against Denver. Just quick hitters, especially in those like 2nd and 6s or like those 3rd and 4s where it's just bang, get it out. Even if he's just a little bit out of his depth, even if he's just a little bit out of position, it's a first down, drive continues, rinse, repeat. So that's great that you brought that up, and I totally agree. But Adam, pivoting to defense, talk to me about this Bills offense facing Spagnuolo and a Chiefs defense that we know loves to bring the pressure and love to make Josh Allen's life hell. What are your thoughts? What are some things that you've pointed out that you're interested in discussing?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I did this week is kind of look at obviously what some of the areas are that they might be able to exploit the Chiefs. And I kind of examined, what their EPA per play looked like against different coverages and different formations. The interesting thing that I did find is that the Chiefs have struggled against empty formations. And that felt kind of counterintuitive the first time that I saw it, because when teams go empty, it seems like it's a pretty clear-cut, easy way for Spags to, dial up blitzes and, just really get after the quarterback. And then you have to be ready for your hot routes. And when I went on to investigate that a little bit more and filtered down and was watching some of the film on why the Chiefs have struggled against empty this year, what I found was that teams were sneaking their way into empty by starting in single back pre-snap. And then motioning the running back out of the backfield and, in line as a receiver post snap, which I think is keeping some of the pressure rates down against empty. And it's allowing teams to pick on Kansas City secondary a little bit more. And one thing that is different about the Kansas City defense this year is obviously they've lost some high impact players in the secondary. And teams are actually going after Bolton quite a bit as well. Their adjusted net yards per attempt against empty formations is dead last. They give up 10 yards per attempt against empty. And it is not just kind of 2-minute drill, end of game script stuff. Most of the plays that teams have had success running empty against Kansas City has been in the first and the second quarter, not stuff, end of half or end of game. So I think that you're going to want to see the Bills try a lot of the same things. And if you think back, really, in the previous matchups with these teams, there was a lot of James Cook motioning out of the backfield, playing as a receiver. When you can get that matchup with Cook on their linebackers, that's one of the ways that the Bills are going to be able to eat in the pass game on Sunday.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I was going to bring up that the last time they played him in the regular season, one of those James Cook touchdowns came on that wheel route when he was coming out of the backfield in motion. And that's something that I think is going to, not to spoil too much, but when we get to the X Factor conversation, he is going to be brought up, because that's one way that you can utilize him beyond just being a running back that I think could take advantage of this Chiefs defense and be able to have success. And Spags is going to bring pressure, but I have noticed that their pressure rates or the blitz percentage is very high, but it's not entirely paying off for them this season like it would in years past. And I think, a part of it could be that teams are just figuring out ways to get the ball out quickly when they show those pressure looks and maybe from those formations that you discussed. And I think that you're going to see a lot of that in this game. And I think it's imperative that, they do come out and empty often, because I think like one of the things too is if you do have Amari Cooper in this game and you do have the ability to win in man-to-man, that's going to make it a little bit more difficult for a Chiefs defense that is usually very sticky in their man coverage. They have Trent McDuffie, who I absolutely love and think is a phenomenal corner. And has played really well since he's been drafted. But you lose Snead and you have a couple young guys in that secondary who have played well because Spags can coach anybody up. But I think you could still exploit if you have the right group in there. And if I'm talking about man coverage and I'm talking about pressure being sent and I'm talking about some of the personnel the Bills have, I actually get a little bit encouraged when I think about like if you match Khalil Shakir with maybe a linebacker dropping, or maybe if it's just an extra corner that he could take advantage of and create space. And Josh just needs to get the ball out quickly. And if you can win it empty, if you show the look often, or if you just get creative with how you're motioning from the backfield or how it looks, I think that they will be able to move the ball on this defense. And I think that that's a really key stat that you brought up, because I hadn't known about that until you mentioned it. And it was kind of, it was a part of why I wanted you to bring you on here, because I think that reveals something that I think on Sunday you're going to see the Bills lean into a bit, and I think that will help them. And also, again, just like some of the threat of Josh running out of empty too, because we've seen it in past matchups where maybe they don't blitz, maybe it's an empty set, maybe they send people downfield. It creates a stretch in the field and a little bit of a vacated gap, and Josh can just shake off defenders to get some explosive runs of his own. There's always that threat when you line up in that formation too, and I think that's why it's just something that I think I could see them doing a lot. And I think it's a great thing that you brought up. And only other thing I guess I could think of when it comes to this matchup too is I don't think it means that the Bills are going to stop running, and I don't think it means that the Bills are going to abandon their play action. But I think in a game like this too, considering, how good the Chiefs are at defending against the run and just some of the different metrics that they've shown, it's one that I think you could probably expect to have a game where Josh is passing more than you're seeing total rushing attempts, and I'm totally fine with that. So, Adam, any other thoughts before we pivot over to specific players?
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I guess I was going to add on to that, and of course this does delve a little bit into specific players, is we're talking about empty formations. Obviously, the Bills might be missing some pretty big names on Sunday, but if a player like, let's start with Dalton Kincaid, if he can't go, let's not forget about what Dawson Knox is capable of, right? Mm-hmm. He's had some huge plays against Kansas City in the past, and his abilities as a blocker is going to be huge in, making sure that whatever the read is going to be on defense is going to be more difficult for them to decipher, because, he can do multiple things, right? As a blocker and a pass catcher. So that's somebody that is going to be a player to watch, especially if Kincaid is not able to go on Sunday.
No, it's a great point. Dawson Knox has an opportunity to kind of get back in the good graces of the fan base if Kincaid can't go. And I hope Kincaid can, because I just want to have as many players as possible. But to me, it's also just Knox. People have seemingly, and rightfully so, kind of gotten off the train because of the contract and the production that hasn't matched up to the figures. But I think that in a game like this, where you have Dawson Knox, who can block his ass off and still be a viable receiving threat, as multiple games this year he's had key contributions, this is a big opportunity for him, especially if we're talking about, again, how they're going to align and what you could do with your tight end in a matchup where maybe he's not facing a team's, great nickel corner, but rather a linebacker that he can exploit and take advantage of. And whether they match him up against like Bolton or maybe potentially Tranquil, who I still think are both great players, this is an opportunity for him to kind of, first off, keep the production going if you don't have Dalton Kincaid for an extended period of time, or at least in this matchup, but also, again, create a new threat, especially if you're running out of empty and all of a sudden, you have to worry about Amari Cooper, who's manned up one-on-one and can exploit that matchup. And you have to worry about Khalil Shakir, who's manned up one-on-one. It's not going to be man all the time. I'm not trying to act like it will be, but I do feel like the Chiefs are going to try and present that to the Bills in an effort to get the Bills to prove that they can beat it. And Cooper is their man beater, but also Dawson Knox in a matchup against I don't want to call it inferior. That's a disrespectful term, but rather maybe an unfavorable matchup for the Chiefs. That could provide some kindling and potential explosives for a Bills offense that I think really needs it this Sunday. And, hopefully they just don't pull too much out of the bag either, because it seems like the Chiefs are very good at showing the Bills just enough. But when it comes to the playoffs, they just seem to expand it more and make adjustments. I'm hoping it's not one of those things. So we'll have to wait and see. But Adam, let's get into this topic on the specific players, and we could start on offense. X factors on offense that we think are going to be big contributors. And I spoiled one before. I don't know if you want to lead with him or if you had anyone else on your list that you'd want to go, or just any other names that you wanted to mention in general.
Which player did you spoil? Was it James Cook?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the guy that I'm thinking of. I mean, if they're gonna win, there's gonna be a lot of James Cook in the pass game. I mean, we've seen it already in previous matchups against this team, but also in the running game. I mean, the one thing that is really going to set this apart for the Bills early is if they're able to be an efficient run team on early downs. The Bills, you can see it completely in the way their game scripts go this season. If they have great success rushing on early downs, they're going to be fine in the passing game all day long, because they're going to be able to do whatever they want to do as teams are forced to adjust to how effective that run game is. The offensive line as a whole has been a huge underrated strength. And I saw there was a poll floating around today. This is the best start, right, that the Bills have had in 93, since 93 and in the Sean McDermott era. And is this the best Bills team? And a lot of people voted no. It was like 85%. And I understand I know. And I understand where that sentiment is coming from, but don't underestimate the impact of this team's primary strength on offense, which is the offensive line. It has opened up a whole different world for them in the run and the pass game. And you've seen what it's done for Josh Allen. He doesn't have to be Superman anymore. They can win on offense in multiple ways. And if that's going to be the case, then you're going to see a very hefty dose of James Cook on Sunday.
I firmly agree. I think that's so funny because 8-2, it is the best start that you've gotten to in 32 years. But yeah, I don't like saying it's not the best team because I feel like that's unfair, but maybe not the best construction of the roster, because I do think that they've had some deficiencies. But 8-2 is 8-2, man. You still got to this point, and it deserves respect in its own right. But yeah, James Cook is going to be a vital part of it. I feel like James Cook as a pass catcher this year, it's been utilized, but I feel like the second half of last year to this year, it's obviously died down a bit as far as how often they're using him as a pass catcher compared to years previous. But that's also because James Cook is running probably the best he has too. So you don't really need to force the issue if he's running well, getting you those yardage, and you could just move the ball to someone else that's a contributor in your offense. But yeah, that is something that I hope they can do. And I think, you bring up the offensive line and the physical nature of the offensive line. They're going to play tough, talented defensive lines, going forward. They have a very big gauntlet of them coming up. You have the Niners, who have to deal with several talented defensive players there. You talk about the Rams, who have an emerging young defensive line who I love. Talk about the Lions, who might be a little depleted, but are still stingy tough, and Aaron Glenn is doing a great job with that defense. And yet, with all that, and you look at past matchups, the Bills have still been able to generate, even if it's just a few times a game, some really productive, positive runs, whether that was on early downs or whether that was, after a few maybe drives that didn't go their way. Every game has presented them an opportunity to have a solid drive because they're able to break off a few smash runs, maybe with some pivots with what they want to do offensively, who's on the field, how they do it, whether that's in their heavy personnel, whether that's just out of 11, maybe it's just the angles they end up taking, maybe it's execution, but they're getting these runs in the game. So when they play Kansas City, I expect the same thing. And it's why I want to reinforce that, they'll be passing more than they run, I expect, but I don't think it means they stray off of it entirely. But when it comes to James Cook, I still foresee James Cook having some success on the ground. I just don't expect, 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, as much as it's just a mixture of early down run. Early down run does well. Okay, now we're going to pivot over to maybe a play action shot to see if we can get anything. Or maybe we'll start on first down and line up in empty and have James Cook line up as a wide receiver and maybe try to get a quick hitter to him to get some yak ability and create a really nice opportunity on second down, or maybe a play that gets us 10 plus yards. So he's going to be a vital part of what they want to do. I'm really excited to watch him in this matchup specifically because I think James Cook in space is just a menace to bring down. He's really good with the ball in his hands. The drops haven't really been as much of a conversation, mainly because he's not getting as much volume in the passing game. And I hope that doesn't start this week, because that would suck if we were like, yo, give the ball more. And then he starts, doing that. But I think that's a great one to bring up, and curious if you have anyone else on this list, Adam.
Can I say Ray Davis?
Of course you can.
I mean, if we want
whatever you want, dude.
I mean, if we want to lean into the run game, right? Here's the thing: the Bills so far in 2024 are second overall in rush EPA, which is mind-boggling when you think about how middle of the pack that they've been in the past. And wearing out the Kansas City interior is going to be a huge part, especially if this game stays close. Late in the third and fourth quarter, you want to do everything that you can to wear out Chris Jones and that defensive interior, right? And I've had this conversation with, I was having it with Anthony Prohaska earlier this week. I was talking about, whether or not the Bills should utilize some more outside runs, because they've been so good at running inside the tackles, but maybe kind of switching things up a bit. And that's what he was saying. He wants them to run right at Chris Jones, because, there's been some instances where, it's shown on tape that it can wear him out. And so I think as long as they have success running the ball between the tackles early, they're going to keep going to that well, because it is going to keep some of the heat off of Josh. It is going to wear out that defensive line. And if it's not just James Cook, that means it's going to require, backfield by committee if they want to go with that type of volume. So, let Ray Davis put his helmet down and run through some guys as well.
I'd love it. Again, I think they have a physical enough O-line to do it. And I think Ray Davis has emerged as a very productive part of this offense, who, if you're just asking him to go in there and just hurt people, he can do that. I looked it up too, and I did see a pretty even ratio of in to outside as far as how often they're running in between, how often they're running outside. I think it was 16th in and out was 18th. So it's not like there's a discrepancy either. So it's kind of just pick your poison. I am interested to see what the plan is for Ray Davis in this game, because I think, again, I love Ray Davis under center. I think that just suits his style more. I think if you give him acceleration to run into a group of tackles, he's going to have success with it. And just kind of similar to what we talked about earlier with how the Chiefs are using Kareem Hunt on early downs, that's kind of what I would hope the Bills are going to try and do with him, where it's just push him into the pile to try and get you 3 or 4 yards on that first down, but really just not allowing any backfield penetration. And, I looked at this Colts game, and I think the Colts were doing a pretty good job of it. So you kind of have a litmus test of like what you need to clean up and adjust when you go into this matchup against another very talented front. But Ray Davis is one that, again, you can utilize him in the passing game as well if you want to get a quick hitter to him and try to get some yak opportunity. And I think like the common theme here when we talk about these running backs is trying to beat the Chiefs at their own game when you talk about offense, where not everything's going to be explosive, not everything's going to be downfield. So just try to out methodical the Chiefs, try to outpace them. Try to have these long sustained drives and take advantage. And I think you can do that. You have all the makings to do it. And it's why I love the way this team is constructed offensively. When you look at their running, when you look at the personnel that they've employed and the people that they have in front of them, and how this O-line can block, and how they've ran these different types of concepts that kind of exploit this O-line's physicality, and how that could wear you down over the course of a game. Ray Davis is a part of the whole, but I think that his physical presence, if you do want to maintain authority on the field, would be vital. And also, again, they didn't run a very significant amount of it against the Colts. I don't know if they will run a significant amount of it against the Chiefs, nor how effective it would be. But I love the threat of Ray Davis when to talk about play action. And it's not to say that Cook isn't useful for this, but there's something about the physical imposing of his will that Davis can provide it behind a physical line, that when you ball fake with Josh Allen, and that threat makes that D-line hesitate, he's just going to see the field. He's going to get time, ideally not throw a duck that Kenny Moore picks off. But he's going to see the field. He's going to get time. And I think when you talk about, okay, now this Chiefs defense maybe is trying to sit in zone and not man, and Josh needs to see it, and they're trying to confuse him. All you need is Josh to just extend a play to have an opportunity for an explosive. And that's exactly what he did against the Colts at times. And it's exactly what he can do in this game. And I think bringing up Ray is a great example of one way that could be done. Because again, just a threat of a back that can really push the pile is someone that I think helps Josh Allen out and this passing game out. If you're trying to find ways to offset maybe some of your losses, if they do kind of prove to be problems by not having a Dalton Kincaid or a Keon Coleman as ancillary hands. So I love that. And I just any final thoughts on that before I give you one other answer that might be a little vague, but it's worth bringing up?
Yeah, well, on that topic specifically, the only other thing I say is, again, it's about keeping Chris Jones in check. I've probably said it 3 or 4 times already today, but keeping him in check is huge. And again, that being part of it, having Ray Davis out there, knowing that play action could be a run stuff, that'll keep him honest, especially against Saibo, who, at times might show he has struggles playing a guy like that, being a younger player. Obviously, he's had a nice season as the rest of the line, but that's a matchup that I'm definitely going to be paying close attention to on Sunday.
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that, because my literal next topic is whoever is lined up against Chris Jones, because it's got to be mentioned, man. He's one of the best, if not the best, interior defensive lineman in the NFL. He's a complete game record. Double teams don't phase him. He is very good at making the big play in the big moment. He has a kill factor to him that only the elite have. And he's been a problem in every single matchup. He was a problem in the playoff game where he individually wrecked the touchdown that would have had the Bills go ahead and play in that game. And he's going to be a problem on Sunday because he just is. He's that good. And you brought up Osiris Torrance, someone I wanted to point out specifically. Now, Chris Jones can give any offensive lineman a problem. Anyone. So I don't want to single out Osiris Torrance, who I think has been great in run blocking, but has left some to be desired as a pass blocker in that it's been inconsistent. Not bad, but inconsistent. There's reps where he wins. There's reps where he gets blasted. And one of the things that has been called out and pointed out by several in this network and other people are really how he reacts when there's motion in front of him. And, maybe someone decides to run some sort of stunt and maybe it gets him to hesitate for that split second. I would not be surprised if that's the Chiefs' MO on any pass rushing down, is we have Chris Jones line up maybe as a 1 or maybe, over as a 3, and all of a sudden he's breaking inside and you weren't expecting it. And Chris Jones with full acceleration just gets Torrance off platform and all of a sudden wrecks a play. And that's something that, that's an X factor to me for something that could go very wrong and benefit the Chiefs, is who is defending against Chris Jones? How are they aligning Chris Jones, and how are you planning to defend against him? Because if you can get a double on Jones, that's great. But also keep in mind, the Chiefs D-line is talented. Spags does like to bring the pressure, and bringing the pressure with a talented DT will always pose a threat, even if Josh is really good at escaping pressure. So that's a very integral matchup to the identity of this passing offense in this game. If you have a good rushing attack, maybe you could create a game script that takes Chris Jones out of it a little bit more. But even if you do, he's still going to be a factor. So how do you plan to protect against him, keep Josh Allen's pocket clean, and allow him to have the opportunity to see the field and keep a methodical drive going and not let it get ruined? So I'm glad you read my mind there. Adam, do you have any final offensive thoughts before we carry over to defense?
I think that's about it for the offense. I think we've covered it. It's like I said, these teams are just so similar as they have been statistically, at least the Bills, over the last 2 seasons. It's kind of a coin flip as to which way this can go. But it'll be fun to watch the chess match between Joe Brady and Spagnuolo in this one.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. We got it last year twice, but that was also kind of I don't want to call it half-baked, but, Joe Brady inherits a playbook that's already built, and he has to call it the way he sees fit. It's not really his design or having his full creative input. And now this is an opportunity for Joe Brady to go up against the literal best of the best with his own identity and see what he wants to run. And this is a big game for Joe Brady. And I think that's worth calling out, because I've been pretty pleased with him this year. There have been some things left to be desired, but I think he's had some really strong flashes of play calling and sequencing. I go back to the Seattle game. It's probably my favorite game that Joe Brady has called, because it felt like everything that we had pounded the table for, he was running. But now you're going up against Steve Spagnuolo and a defense that is championship caliber, whatever he is calling it, and whoever is there, it's always going to be productive. What do you have, and what are you prepared to do to offset some of the strengths of this defense? How do you mitigate the pressures that they show? What do you do if Josh Allen snaps the ball and they show a simulated pressure and drop back into coverage? How are you prepared to overcome and outdo one of the best in the game? And that's going to be a very key matchup too. didn't put Joe Brady on this list because talking about the OC feels very easy, but like it is going to make or break what you could do against the Chiefs at home. So I think Brady, has a bag of tricks ready. I think that I also want to point out, like, I don't want to call the Colts game vanilla. I used that term yesterday. I kind of regret using it. It wasn't vanilla, but it almost felt like it wasn't a true showing of what the Bills are capable of. And I feel like that bag of tricks will be more on display against the Chiefs. Do you feel that way, Adam, or do you think that's more of like a kind of a presumption?
No, I do. I think that they were just kind of sticking to, things that they knew were going to work and get out of there in a safe fashion. You know what I mean? That game is kind of one of those games where, the head coach is, obviously saying to them, hey, he'll never say this to the media, right? But when you're playing an inferior opponent, you can see it in the way that the team runs their game scripts, right? And vanilla, I don't know if vanilla is the term. I just think that they kept going back to the well. Maybe not dynamic. Maybe not dynamic is kind of like the phrase, right? Because they just kept going to the well of what worked against that defense, and that's fine. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But in this game, you're kind of going to need the whole bag because that's how these games always end up working. And you make a great point about, this is really going to be the first time that we're able to see Joe Brady run this offense really with his full bag of tricks. The one thing that I will say that they're fairly effective at this year that they really have never been able to do in the Josh Allen era is run screens that are not just, wide receiver screens, right? They've worked in some stuff with the backs. And again, it's a small thing and it's not a huge high percentage of plays to the overall game script. But again, it's something in the bag that they can go to in the right situation that may make or break a drive and result in points on the board.
Absolutely. Yeah, little wrinkles of some of the things that you haven't been able to execute consistently in the past, I think could be fun to throw out in this game, but it's also a very tough game to try and trot those things out because look at who you're playing. Do you really want to try, a different form of your screen? And then all of a sudden it's just a bad execution error that doesn't work. And I know they tried getting James Cook a couple of those in the Colts game, and Josh I think the pressure just completely caused him to whiff and throw just a bad ball that was either over his head or like on the wrong side of his body. And I was kind of giggling because I'm like, oh man, like, would this have worked? Maybe it would have gotten you like 5 or 6 yards, but it's just so funny that they tried it and it just got absolutely destroyed on the first go. But that's also teach tape. Like, that's something you could use for next week. Hey, why don't we try doing this instead of this and see if this works? Like, and that's why I don't think it's impossible to see that happen again. And maybe they try some of those quick screens to Cook, which I would love because again, ball in Cook's hands is always a good thing. The ball in Cook's hands when he's got an open field and yak ability, I think, is also a good thing. So I hope they trot it out a lot more. And yeah, this is just an opportunity for Joe Brady to expand the playbook, show us what he's got, show us how he feels this game too, because you know who you're up against and you know what they like to do. The Chiefs are going to try and give you very limited opportunities to execute. So what are you prepared to do to make sure that the time you do have with the ball is productive? That is a matchup we'll be watching very closely. We're going to pivot over to defense, Adam, but I'm going to pull the banner just for a second because I want to tell these good people about something very important. And I'm going to stand up so you can see the shirt I'm wearing. Yes, friends, that is the 26 shirts designed, printed, Cover One Premium One Pass shirt that you can get if you become a One Pass member and insider today. Friends, that One Pass that we offer is the lifeblood of our network as it allows us to have access to all of the resources that we use on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute, second-to-second basis, where we are able to find any data, watch any film, and be able to provide any insight for you, both in our video platforms, in the videos we make and the live shows we have, as well as the written articles that are being published on Bill Sports Illustrated, which you should be reading if you have not gotten the opportunity to do so. The subscription is $60 a year. You have the opportunity to get one of these awesome shirts. You also have an opportunity to become a member of our premium Discord, where there are infinite channels with infinite discussions for you to have with our amazing groups of insiders and friends. This month's giveaway will be formally announced tomorrow as well. Well, actually, no, I'm just going to do it now. I'll do the post tomorrow, but I'm just going to tell you all what it is. We are giving away a James Cook jersey and a Ray Davis jersey. In the spirit of running back pairings, in the spirit of running back duos, we decided we wanted to run that. So this month, two lucky insiders, I should have had that right, will be the recipients of either a James Cook or a Ray Davis jersey. We will be announcing the winners of those contests in December. Thank you all so much for being a distinguished One Pass member. As RJ says, such a cool shirt design. And as Music Blogger says, Adam, that's a nice hat. I have the same one, but it's not a wide brim. That is a nice hat, Adam. I did notice that when you came in. I didn't want it to get lost on you. That is a very nice hat you're wearing.
Yeah, that's my lucky hat. I wear the black one on big game weeks only. That's the one that's got some magic in it. So we're trying something new this season. It's worked so far.
It's worked so far. I hope it works again on Sunday. And we will now pivot this conversation over to our biggest X factors on defense. Adam, anyone specifically that you would like to call out that you could see being a pivotal piece of this matchup?
Yeah, can I call two? I'm going to say
as many as you want. Yeah. As many as you want.
It's going to be Greg Rousseau and it's going to be Von Miller. You know, the Chiefs' weakness at the tackle position, specifically at the left tackle position, is where the vulnerability is that the Bills are going to be able to attack. The fact that they really only lean on the pass as much as they do on that third down. If you can play zone coverage, if you can bracket Travis Kelce, take away the first read as long as possible, that's going to give those defensive ends time to get home. I know a lot of people, you know, the sentiment that I see, of course, on Twitter and, you know, just talking to Bills fans is that the defensive line, of course, this happens every year, right? I feel like there's complaints about the defensive line. People always want more out of it. But I share weekly the pressure rate stats and the QB hit stats, and Von Miller and Gregory Rousseau are, you know, among two of the best in the league, both ranked in the top 15 this season through week 10. So the amount of pressure that the Bills have been able to generate off the edges has been outstanding with both of those players in the lineup. And that's always kind of been the thing. Can you get after Patrick Mahomes? Greg Rousseau has made huge plays against Patrick Mahomes in the past. We've seen, you know, pass breakups. We've seen an interception. Same thing with Von Miller. Before the injury, of course, he made that huge pressure that resulted in the Teron Johnson interception to end the game. So in my book, it's really going to be on those two guys to get after Mahomes and make the plays that they need to stall drives and ultimately end the game.
And this is why I think it's imperative that they shut down the run too, because if you can get the Chiefs kind of take away the thing that's helped them the most, which are those early down productive rushes, and make them fall into more true passing downs, that's going to lend itself well to your two edge rushers who have been consistently generating pressure. But also, I think it's going to help your defense a bit, because I do believe the strength of this defense is boundary coverage. And if they are trying to use DeAndre Hopkins on the boundary, if they're trying to let Xavier Worthy leak behind a defense, I think the Bills can at the very least take it away long enough where a four-man pressure that contains Von Miller and Greg Rousseau can hit home. Now, one of the things that does concern me, as it has bitten the Bills quite a bit in the past, is Patrick Mahomes' pocket evasion and escapability. The same way that we could talk about how good Josh Allen is at this is the same way I could say Patrick Mahomes is very good at this as well. And that was on display in pretty much every matchup you've seen of the Chiefs this year. There have been numerous times where the defense has had really nice, high-quality coverage on the Chiefs receivers, tight ends, but Mahomes is very good at escaping the pocket. And if you are presenting a four-man pressure with linebackers that are dropping into coverage, or a nickel corner that is dropping into coverage, and you give Patrick Mahomes green field, he's going to take advantage of it. He's going to make strides in the pocket, and he's going to be able to escape even the longest of reaches, which Greg Rousseau, AJ Epineza can have, which is why I think you'll probably see the Bills try to keep a spy on him this game, or at the very least see if they can cheat it a little bit, see if the four-man pressures can hit, and ultimately if Mahomes burns you, that's when you make the pivot, which has happened in the past. But that's a great point. I had Von Miller on this list. If they shut down the run, I think that these two players are absolutely integral. But my first one that I wrote down kind of coincides with this. And, you know, saying if the Bills can shut down the run is a big if. And I mean consistently shut it down. I'm not talking, you know, you get your plays here and there. I'm saying, like, take away the threat of those early down runs, especially if they're running inside the tackles, which, again, we know the Chiefs like to do. And this is the IDL, and Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, you know, the new additions in Jefferson and Phillips, new old additions, I guess. And then Austin Johnson, known prolific nickel corner. When we talk about this defensive line, the interior's just got to step it up in this game. This whole entire matchup can be dictated by how well this unit plays. And if you are able to take away the threat of Kareem Hunt up the middle of the defense consistently on early downs, even on late downs, whenever they decide to run the ball, I think that is when you are going to see the advantageous opportunity for the Bills defense and those edge rushers that you mentioned, Adam, to be able to have consistent success, or at the very least force Mahomes to go off script, which is still very dangerous, but a world that I think you can live in, because if you have Mahomes flushed out and Mahomes maybe could be baited into making a throw he thinks he can make, and you could bait him into making a mistake, then that's a world that I think the Bills would be okay with living in, because obviously off-script plays are magical, they're fun, but it's not sustainable. And if you're working him out of the pocket because you have a four-man pressure that's hitting because they can't effectively run the ball, and therefore the coverage is dictating what this Chiefs offense can do, that's when you're going to have success. And I think there is an opportunity and a realistic chance that that could happen. It's just a matter of how effective is Hunt going to be. Also, I saw Pacheco came off, or his practice window opened up. So there is the possibility that they do roll him out there. But even then, I don't know what the snap count will look like. So right. I'm expecting Kareem Hunt, Carson Steele, Samaje Perine. I'm willing to, amend this take if it's a different look. But that's really the biggest matchup for me. Can Ed and Daquan Jones be more formidable in the interior of the defensive line? Can they push the pocket a little bit more? How quick are the Chiefs going to plan on getting the ball out? And how are they going to try and disrupt the rhythm of this unit that, really predicated itself on you holding the ball? But we're going to have to wait and see. I'm not overly optimistic about it. I want to believe, and I need to see it to believe it. So Ed and Daquan Jones, the depth of this D-line, I honestly think Jefferson could have a potentially big game. Jefferson was generating some pressures in his limited opportunities, and he also had more snaps than I thought he was going to have in that game. Yeah. There was a significant amount of Quentin Jefferson. So, hell, man, if you feel like you're not getting a spark, put this man in there as whether you want to line him up as a 1 or a 3, and just let's see what he's got, because he pushes a pocket, and that could be a threat too. So IDL, Ed, Daquan, those are really my biggest things. Adam, any others that you want to point out before we move on?
Yeah, well, just on that topic, the other thing is, not just making sure they're getting in their run fits and winning at the point of attack, but also when Patrick Mahomes does try to escape the pocket because the defensive ends are generating pressure, making sure that they maintain the integrity of the pocket, right? You don't want him to be able to just run right up the middle of the field. At least make sure that you're forcing him to take the long way, get to the outside, give your linebackers and your DBs a chance to come downfield and funnel him to the right spot so he's not breaking your back with these crazy long runs that you've seen him spring off at times.
Absolutely, man. That is the one thing that drives me the most crazy watching. Because listen, I fully prepare for Patrick Mahomes to have completions, to move the ball downfield. We got to be realistic about the matchup we have. It's when you actually disrupt that play, but Mahomes gets a free 10 yards because you just didn't maintain that pocket, and you didn't have players in the vicinity that could crash down on him to prevent that from happening. If I see a 3rd and 6 turn into a 16-yard game when everyone was covered and the pocket collapsed on him, I'm going to be infuriated. So please don't allow that to happen. I don't know how you want to do it. I don't know how they're going to line up. I know they've ran some odd fronts, and maybe that could play a role in how they maintain the pocket integrity. But for the love of all that is holy, please don't let that man escape the pocket. And if you do, at the very least, flush him to a side where he's not burning you for a first down. He's going to try and do it, especially if you have sticky enough, disciplined enough zone or man coverage against those talented receivers they do have. But I have another one. And, again, it's one that you could probably say anytime they play the Chiefs, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this. But whoever's defending Travis Kelce, I put Deron Johnson down just because I feel like you'll go to him to try and match up with the tight end. Even though there is a size mismatch, Deron Johnson plays above his size a lot and is very physical and very good in coverage. If you could shut down that component and take one of, Patrick Mahomes, granted, you pointed it out about the negative EPA factor, which I was not aware of. But still, we know who he is. We know what he means to the Chiefs offense, and we know how defenses respect him. If you get a good matchup, whether it's Deron Johnson, whether it's Dorian Williams, and you're able to just mitigate his impact on the Chiefs offense and their passing attack, then I do think a lot more success can be had, because there's no threat, there's no middle of the field consistency. And then all of a sudden, Benford and DeMar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp and Russell Douglas can just kind of handle business in the secondary and be able to try and just offset some of the threat that is the speed of Xavier Worthy and the incredible hands of DeAndre Hopkins. So, Adam, any thoughts on just the defending Kelce matchup beyond it being Johnson or a linebacker, whatever you see happening, whoever you see fit?
Yeah, well, of course, on the flip side of, the negative EPA that he has this season in zone coverage, which again is kind of remarkable when you think about what an animal he's been against zone coverage in the past, finding those soft spots. The flip side of this is that he is the team leader in EPA against man coverage this season, right? So, teams that are trying to win with man and manning up against him have not had a lot of success. So you're right. I mean, depending on where they're lining him up and depending on who's covering him, if it's going to be Turan, that kind of seems like the most logical thing. Of course, the Bills don't necessarily have their DBs travel too much. Occasionally it happens, right. but they like to play their defense and let the cards kind of fall as they may, right? Or the chips fall as they may. So that's definitely going to be a matchup to watch. But I'm optimistic that they're going to play a healthy dose of zone coverage because it's kind of what the Bills do. And if bracketing Travis Kelce in zone coverage keeps him at bay, I kind of think that's going to be the best way for them to go, this week.
And I expect them to be aware of that metric, and I expect their game plan to be similar to years past. And, whether that's shadowing him and having somebody be on him, but also keep him in someone's realm where there's no opportunity for him to either break away with the big catch or be able to generate any sort of first down yardage if it's a behind the sticks throw, which the Chiefs love doing with him, by the way. Those quick hitters to the flat on like third down where he could get some extra yardage, or maybe even just an early kindling pass to him on like a first or second down. Like, that's kind of seemed to be the MO for Travis Kelce this year, is far more of like a service, like a dirty work kind of tight end. And I'm not saying that he won't go downfield on you at all, but more so like Kelce's a sure-handed guy. He can win quickly. So if you do try to man him up consistently, that can be an issue. But I have faith in the coverage of Duron Johnson on him, but also if they do decide to stay in a disciplined zone look and try to take that away. But it just worries me because I feel like it's so hard to man him up, but also like if you can get someone to man up on him, which we've seen like Saran Neal of all people be able to do pretty well on him in the past. I think Russell Douglas last year actually had a few situations where he was manned up on Kelce and did decently. So like if you can do it more consistently, I think you should, because if you have a one-on-one matchup where you don't have to compromise a second member of your defensive secondary or another linebacker in your front seven to kind of sell out to cover him, you can get a lot more flexibility in your coverage. But yeah, I mean, it's a tall task. It's easier said than done when you're talking about an all-pro and future Hall of Famer and terrible actor. So it's a lot of fun to see what this matchup's going to potentially look like. But all respect to Kelce, I'm only joking around about the acting thing. He was fine in that show. I saw a few clips. I saw a lot of hate comments. I forgot the name of the show he's in, but everyone was like, man, he was the worst part of this. And I'm like, come on, it's his first acting gig. Let's be nice. It wasn't that great, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world. But no, he's still an all-world tight end. I was saying to you before we went live, like, you could talk to me about the negative zone EPA and all of these things and maybe age catching up to him. I don't think Travis Kelce is gone. I don't think he's done. No. I think until proven otherwise, until we get to the playoffs and Travis Kelce is a complete non-factor, that man is still public enemy number one. He's still a threat. So I hope the Bills can figure out a proper matchup, whether that be discipline zone, whether that be man, if they decide to do it. So Adam, any final defensive thoughts before we get to our final thoughts on this matchup before we sign up? Any X factors you think we may not have covered? Anything you just want to point out specifically? Yeah,
it's, the key to stopping him is that marriage, like we said, between the pass rush and the defense. If you can take away the first read long enough to let Von Miller or Greg Rousseau or anybody get home, they're going to be in okay shape. And I think that's probably, given the volume of talk we've heard about their struggles in pass protection with the tackles, that's probably been the formula to slowing him down this season.
Yeah, no, 100%. And anything you could do to disrupt the lanes that Mahomes can throw in too. The Bills love sending four. They don't like blitzing often. And it's kind of, I get it. I do get it, because the core concept, the thing every team wants to do is win with a four-man pressure, because you could just max out in coverage. And, I discussed that with Anthony a few weeks ago, but it's something that's been known. And one great example of this have been the New York Jets of the past, where they are a quarters coverage team and they just sent four and it worked because their four-man rush was so good that the Bills want to be that. And the Bills want to do it. And I believe in some of the talent on this Bills D-line, but I also think right now, and it's a combination of things, right? It's a combination of teams get the ball out quickly because they know the Bills can win with their pass rush, game plan dependent. Maybe teams run the ball and true pass rushing opportunities aren't there for them because maybe early down runs are successful on the Bills. But when the Bills are in a true passing down and they send four and, it wins, but it doesn't always win. That's where I kind of have some concern. And I'm hoping that a tendency breaker that we might see in this game would be the Bills to blitz more. I think that there is still plenty of potential if they decide not to generate pressures and sacks. Again, using some of their disguises and simulated pressures to kind of throw Mahomes off and in a loop. We know they love switching coverages post snap and they love confusing quarterbacks. So they're going to try and do it against Mahomes. But it'd be fun to just marry that with a few more 5 or 6 man pressures in a game. I'm not saying you got to be, on their level where you do it as frequently as they do and make it kind of a core identity. But the biggest tendency breaker I'd like to see from this Bills defense is just ramping up pressure with more bodies and using Terrell Bernard and using Teron Johnson and sending the 6 and just seeing if you can win with it. Because Denver in the previous game did that. They did get burned on one very big DeAndre Hopkins reception that felt equally like it was due to the lack of numbers, but also due to someone not being in their spot. So there is a risk of getting exposed when you do it, but I want to see them try. I want to see extra bodies. I want to see them try and just make Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable because I feel like if you can establish blitzing early and kind of create a narrative of disruption, especially if it's pushing them in really bad spots and bad downs and distances, then maybe that can help you if you do decide to adjust to more 4-man pressures and just going for coverage heavy and being able to kind of make Mahomes mentally hesitate a little bit or just throw him off his game just a smidge. And that's really like one final defensive thought I had. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, this goes back to the very start of our show. What did we talk about? This game is a little bit like house money, right? And so if you want to try something a little different or mix it up, I feel like now's the time to do it because you're going to get a look at something that may give you a potential edge that you haven't had before in the playoffs. Now, granted, last year when Sean McDermott was the defensive coordinator, he was the type of defensive coordinator that liked to heat up quarterbacks a lot more than I feel like they have this year with extra bodies. And this seems to be a little bit more of a Bobby Babich type thing that they're not bringing the heat as much. It could also have something to do with the fact that they don't want to leave, some of the linebackers that they have filling in for Matt Milano on an island in coverage. Right. They've gone to obviously a lot more dime on third down still this year. They're kind of utilizing that at times. But I agree with you. If that's the direction that they want to go, I'm not going to be upset if it burns them because, again, it's worth trying, because now's the time you want to try it, not in January, February when you don't know what the end result could end up being.
Absolutely. And I actually really like this comment from Biggie Scooby, who says, I will trade a few big plays if it results in hitting Mahomes very hard. It's not even just about hitting him, but I think it's a combination of knowing that maybe if you bring the extra bodies, you can throw him off his game, but also being aware of the matchup. And what I mean is we know what Kansas City is. We know what they can be offensively. Kansas City is not a team you stop. They just aren't. They're way too talented, and they have the current best quarterback in the NFL. To me, when I feel when this team plays Kansas City is they are going to score. They are going to have these annoying drives. They are going to make a play because they have a talented quarterback who can simply do that. Very rarely have you seen a truly shut down Chiefs team. And there's usually extenuating circumstances that lead up to it, like the Super Bowl and the entire offensive line being hurt against an extremely good Tampa Bay front. When I think of the Bills in this matchup, and one thing that I think can benefit them is I am totally okay, like you said, with a few big plays, because if that is paired with a blitz that takes away like 15 yards from that same drive that had the big play or stalls them at any spot, and you're talking about a Chiefs team that has to settle for field goals, I can 100% live with that. And I think, if anything, that puts you in a much better spot offensively, because Kansas City isn't dictating the game script with a long drive that ends in a touchdown, but rather maybe a chunk play here and there, maybe an explosive. But in a key moment, you sent pressure, you brought Mahomes down, it stymied the productivity of that drive. Now, all of a sudden, they're either settling for 3 or you push them back far enough where it didn't even matter. So that's why I want to do it, Adam. And like, that's a great point too. We're in November, right? Like, this matchup, we want to win it, but whether they win it or whether they lose it, it doesn't really mean anything outside of what it can mean for your playoff seeding. So if you win this game, great, we'll get our bragging rights for a week. But I'm used to the fact that we've beaten this team in the regular season and it's ultimately meant nothing. So at this point, I'm cool with this being like hey, why don't we just throw things and see what works? And if this does work, we might have something for when we get to winter, when we get to the cold months. Maybe we see them again. And if we do, and maybe there's injury or maybe there's some circumstance that doesn't allow us to hit with 4 consistently, then just send the pressure and find ways to send the pressure, the angles you could take, the rushers you can bring, how you mix it up over the course of a game based on the situation. And I think you could have success. Will it work? I don't know. Will they do it? I don't know. Do I want to see them try? Absolutely. That is really the biggest thing for me.
I just took a second while we're having this conversation to go look it up. And when Kansas City sees between 0 and 4 pass rushers, their EPA per dropback is Patrick Mahomes' EPA per dropback is 0.14. When they bring 5 or more, it is 0.08. So still positive, but that is right, like a 0.06 per dropback, which is not nothing. I mean, that's a pretty measurable number. It's a pretty big change. So why not? Let's heat them up a little bit and see what happens, especially maybe they don't do it as much in the first half, but bring it in the second half when they kind of know what Kansas City is trying to do, which is, again, something that we've seen a little bit more out of this defense this year.
See, I almost have a preference of bringing it in the first and not second. And the reason I think that is because if you pressure him early, heat him up early, and they can't establish a lead, I think that actually benefits you way more, because if you aren't as threatened by the downfield passing attack as you've been in years past, then what better way to really take control of the game and force them out of their game script of running for those methodical, kind of chunk yards, by getting a lead and heating them up and not allowing them to have those productive early drives where it plays into their favor and they can keep an offense off the field. I'm not opposed to the idea of doing it in the second half instead, but rather heat them up early, don't allow them to be productive, let your offense do its thing. You get to and this is a complete hypothetical. I have all the respect in the world for the Chiefs, so I say this knowing that this probably won't happen. But let's say you get to a reality where the halftime score is similar to what Denver did, and you're up 14-3 going into halftime. Or I think it was 14-10 for them, but in our case, call it 14-3. Now you get into the second half, and maybe you don't have to send the blitz as often. Maybe the Kansas City Chiefs are expecting you to do it, trying to get short, and then all of a sudden you switch it up, and now you drop back into coverage, and they're just not kind of sensing a sense of rhythm or feeling like they're comfortable on their platform. Again, do I think it's going to happen? I don't know. I don't want to say anything with certainty, as much as it's just something I'd like to see them try out. And again, I'm not saying this is going to happen either, but if this team does drop this game, it's consequential for your hopes of a 1 seed, but it's not consequential in the grand scheme. Because again, the Bills can win 3 more games this season and probably lock down a playoff spot in the division with these at this point. So Adam, any final thoughts before we sign off for the evening?
Well, that part of the conversation is fun because I think that whatever both of these teams decide to do, I think that's going to be a huge indicator on, kind of how much they value the importance of this game to each of them, right? Because, Andy Reid and Sean McDermott are 2 of the best coaches in the NFL. And they've done so by being conservative when they need to be conservative and being aggressive when they need to be aggressive. And, what I expect to happen is I expect this to be more of a feel out between these 2 teams, kind of like we've seen in the past where things don't really open up until the second half. But if the Bills did want to throw a curveball, like you're saying, that would be one of the ways to do it. And it could pay off. That gamble could pay off in a regular season game that, again, if you lose, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, no, it's not. And I don't want everyone here to think we're okay with losing, as much as it's just again, you're 8-2 going in this game. This is the most comfortable I think I've been playing the Chiefs in the regular season. Because each of the past few years, it's either been early in the year where you're still feeling out your identity and you don't know what the rest of the season holds for you. And They still don't. There's still plenty of football left this year, but it was much earlier on, and you don't want the team to reel. And then they win those games. And then last year, you play them very late in the year, but you're 5-5, and a loss to them is essentially like a slit to your throat as far as the season goes. This year, you're 8-2. You're top of your division by 4.5 games right now. You have a pretty comfortable, sizable lead that you can easily control. A win here absolutely locks and secures that even further. But I do think that it's just probably the best position to be in right now. And I think you get a little more comfort and flexibility in what you want to run in this game, which is why I keep drawing it back to maybe tendency breaking. And Evan Lown, aka my buddy Gibby, thank you for watching, says lack of early production really hasn't been a problem for KC all season. Their defense has been doing well, limited points in the second half. Absolutely. Their defense is still really, really good. A part of it is, again, timely pressures. A part of it is really good man coverage. They do a lot of things really well, and that's all because of Spags. But this kind of adds more fuel to my fire of then why not try to crank the pressure up in the first half and avoid getting in a situation where that Chiefs defense can control the script of the game, can cake you out of things. Now, if the Bills fall to an early lead and you can't run as effectively and all of a sudden you're forced into passing way more often, which they probably want given some of your injuries, that's not an ideal world to live in, even with a great quarterback like Allen and even with some of your talent. So this just adds more of my blitzing agenda. And I think it's so funny that the chat kind of went off once we started talking about blitzing at him, because I just feel like dudes fucking love blitzing. Dudes love sending 6 dudes at a quarterback. Will it work all the time? No, sometimes it's ugly as hell. But the second I see the Bills bring heat, I'm just like, let's fucking go. I want this to work so bad. It's so fun. So, oh man, Adam, again, thank you for being here, man. Do you have any one last final thought on this before we say goodnight and flip it over to our friend Anthony, who is waiting in the wings?
The only thing I'll say is that the last topic that I've heard a lot about is the Bills haven't beaten any good teams this year, right? I would challenge everyone to go back and look at Kansas City's schedule last year and look at who their wins were over and look at what the end result was at the end of the season. To me, the regular season performance isn't as much about wins and losses as much as it is statistical production. And, were you in those games? Because when you put two teams this good pitted against one another, it's going to be a coin flip most of the time. You're going to see about a 50% win probability, going one way or the other. Mm-hmm. As long as they're tight in this game, as long as they play this game close, I'm going to feel pretty good about what's going to happen in January, February, win or lose. And I think Bills fans should feel the same way.
And again, guys, just enjoy it. Is it the best iteration of the Bills over the next 5 years? In my opinion, I don't think so. We're 8-2. It's going pretty much above expectations. And if I asked anyone before the season started, I know Uber had the same thing yesterday, what would you be at the bye week if you could choose in a realistic way? 8-3. I think every person would have signed up for it, but I love 9-2. I want 9-2. I think 9-2 is extremely possible. So I'm hoping for the best. It's a great matchup. It's a tough team. I think this is something that you could potentially see again in the playoffs, but for now, focus on Sunday and see what happens. Adam, you're a fantastic guest. Thank you for being here as always. Tell the people where they can find you and what you got going on.
Yeah, you can find me on X or Twitter, whatever you like to call it. It's at Adam Pencil. I'm bringing you all kinds of charts every week. I'm tracking how the Bills perform and where they stack up against the rest of the league. And feel free to follow me, interact with me. If you have specific questions or stats that you want me to look up, I'm happy to check that stuff out for you. And my goal is to bring you guys information about analytics that makes it more accessible to, the common fan, because I just think it's amazing the types of tools that we have nowadays to measure the talent and ability of the teams that we have in this league that goes beyond the wins and losses. So give me a follow and send me a note, and I'm happy to send you anything that you want.
And yeah, I cannot suggest enough to any person that watches the show that is a Bills fan to follow Adam, because Adam is one of the go-to in our network and really just in general in the Bills space for any sort of advanced analytics that you're looking for. He does a great job of breaking things down on his Twitter and finding the interesting matchups that you can really pay extra attention to really in any Bills game throughout the course of a year. And again, it's why I wanted to get you on here, Adam, because I know you were pulling up some really, really niche, changing the way I kind of thought about it as far as what the matchup could look like against Kansas City. It's why I wanted you here. So do yourselves a favor, follow Adam. It's in my eyes, one of the smartest things you could do if you're a Bills fan. And Adam, I appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. I just have to pull this comment up before we sign off tonight, which says, man, he's definitely talking about me, by the way. Man, this guy has long-winded thoughts on each topic. Triton, thank you for being here. We appreciate you watching. What does this one say? Or you make field goals a reason? I don't even know. But thank you for being here, Triton. I appreciate you watching. For me, my name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter /X at show_DeRosa. I tweet about football and other random things. This show, Under Review, is live every Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m. So stay tuned for the next episode as we navigate the dark waters of the bye week. Again, OnePass sign up is in the description below. Feel free to drop a like if you enjoyed this video. And if you hated the guy that had the long-winded thoughts on each topic, feel free to drop a dislike. Your view is still appreciated. Don't go anywhere if you are on YouTube because Mr. Anthony Prohaska is live at 9 p.m. to go over this matchup in even further detail. He will be talking about the schematics and all of the key components that you can check out. So if you are interested in hearing more, feel free to watch that. But for us, we are done this evening. Thank you all so much again for being here. You all take care. And as always, go Bills. See you soon.